Now when we talk about the carburetor circuit, we have the carburetor right here. We have the intake right here. We have the intake valve right here. All of that has to work in conjunction to provide a smooth flow of air in, over, and into the engine. What we have is a lot of people putting some big components on these little engines, and what they don't realize is that you can have a big carb and a big intake, and you have a little tiny intake into the engine, and then you have this big cylinder right here. Well, all of your flow depends on this small area. That's it. You can put a carb that big, you can put a intake reed valve that big on there, but this is all you're going to have. This is where you're going to have a problem. I'll put it to you in another way. Let's say this. Here's our big engine right here. This is the piston. This is the intake, or this is the piston and the cylinder. This right here is your reed valve and your intake. We'll come over here, and this is your carburetor. We have this big 30mm carburetor right here going into a 40mm reed valve, and that goes into your 25mm intake on the engine right here. Now, with whatever I've explained to you right now and in the last video, how big of the intake flow do we have? We only have that big because that's the smallest area. 25mm right there. The whole intake has got to be consistent all the way along. It can't have a small blockage. Now, I would love to take my intake and make it as big as this. I would get a lot better fuel flow, but I can't because the little engines were not designed for it. So if you can understand, you can have the largest carburetor, you can have the largest engine, but if your intake is only 25mm, due to the fact that that is the casting on the engine, which is right here, then that's your airflow right there. That leads into the next question this gentleman had. He said, well, how big a carburetor do you need? The carburetor is based, according to the books, your intake is right here on your reed valve. Alright, that has so much area in that reed valve right here. This has so much area right here, okay, and right in here. If you fill this up with water or that with water, you'll have so many cc's. Okay? Now there is a mathematical equation that will tell you, with this amount of intake right here and right here, the area inside here, or the cc's, should correspond to how many cc's you have coming out of your carb. That will determine how big a carb that you need. Remember, carburetors are only actuated by vacuum. Vacuum, when you put on your throttle, it sucks air. Now think about this for a moment. You think, well, I'm going to put a big carb on there, I'm going to get a lot more power. Well, yes, maybe, no. Suppose that you have a 28mm on your bike, whatever size bike you have, it fits for it, okay? And when you pull on that throttle, the vacuum sucks the air and the fuel through this small area right here, okay, at a high velocity. Now imagine if you had the same carburetor, but your intake was this big across. Now imagine you've got this engine and you have this big a carburetor. Now when you open that throttle, how much air and how much time is it going to take to suck all this into the engine? The air will be a lot slower. Your throttle response will be a lot slower. So the trick is to find a carburetor that's big enough that will work on your engine size, but not too big to where your throttle response is sluggish because you're actually drawing too much. For instance, if I would have put a 34 or 38 on my bike, it just simply won't work. What I'd like to do, and I'd like to try, is this is a 28 right here. I would love to have a 26. But I don't know if they make them. A 26 and put a huge jet in it and try that, because the throttle response would be so much better. I would get a lot more vacuum, a lot more quick snap throttle response. And I hope that's explained how the intake circuit works. And our next video is going to be on needle jets, jet valves, and how they work in simple layman's terms. But remember, you need to go out and do these things. Don't just watch this. Grab your carburetor, tear it down, take a look at it. Okay.